With the mounting pressure and uncertainty surrounding the past year and a half, it's no wonder that more people than ever are rethinking their life's purpose. For many, that means redefining work life balance while considering different options for the future. Upcoming next is an exclusive CXO panel discussion on Great Resignation to Great Retention. I am delighted to have senior industry leaders join this panel. Please join me in welcoming Balaji Ethirajan, President, People Services, TVS Supply Chain Solutions, Sonali Mishra, Vice President, Talent and Head of HR, Bain and Company, Deepti Gupta, Executive Vice President and CHRO, Jubilant Foods, Siraj Chakrabarti, Head of People and Culture Round Glass. Also, I would like to invite Smriti Ahuja, Chief People Officer, Times Internet, to moderate the panel discussion. Over to you, Ms. Ahuja.
Happy to be a part of this panel and looking forward to our interactions. It's a subject that has worried, distressed, and made anxious a lot of people, the Great Resignation. And when I was thinking about the subject as a prelude to our meeting today, I was reading up some statistics, and it was interesting to see that in April to June quarter 2020, the unemployment rate in India was as high as 21%. Now, April to June 21, we again had a brutal wave, but somehow the unemployment rate didn't go back to 21%. It sort of was at 12%. And, sort of that led to the conclusion it was the lockdown, not the willingness to work. So irrespective of the pandemic, we see that people are very eager to be at work. Of course, there's a whole financial situation behind that. Now, currently, as we speak, the September numbers say that the India unemployment rate is down to 7%. So we are looking at 1/3 the number of what it was in 2020, April-June quarter. Now, what is happening globally? Globally as well, the rich countries have something like 30 million open positions, which is something that has never been seen before. And how did this name, the Great Resignation, actually come about? America in September had a little over 4 million resignations. And Americans being so good with this, they named it the Great Resignation or the Big Quit. And the Chinese have a name for it as well, called the Tang Ping or lying flat. So there are a whole lot of things that are happening across the globe, right? And I would love to hear your perspectives on, is it domain specific? Is it industry specific? Is it here to stay? And let me start with you, Balaji, on this question about this big quit. Do you think this Great Resignation is here to stay, or is it again going to be cyclical and sort of things will settle down soon? And if they settle down soon, how soon do you think they'll settle down?
Thank you, Smriti. I think that's a great starting comment from you. I think the way I look at Great Resignation is part of a business cycle, right? For example, today in many countries, particularly in the rich countries and developing countries, the inflation rates are very high. For example, in the US, you talked about, the Great Quit or the Great Resignation. Inflation is at a 30-year high. So obviously, wage levels are going up, inflation is going up, and companies which are not able to compensate the employees, they will face this resignation. And the way I look at it is, it's a kind of a pendulum. It's a kind of a cyclical balance. And, right now I look at the bargaining power is shifting more towards the employees, right? And for example, many of us will know, we have seen scenarios like this. So I'm kind of concerned, and it is important to recognize the challenges that we are facing. We should not lose sight that we have HR people like us have seen this, trends earlier. For example, during the dot-com phase in the late 90s and early 2000, you have seen there is a enhanced resignations. The salary levels went through the roof, but I think then it kind of stabilized. So the way I would think about it is fueled by many factors. Inflation is one. Obviously, there are certain sectors which are very, what would I say, very dynamic. For example, all of us know information technology, anything to do with artificial intelligence and stuff like that. But if you look at core sector, things are not all that bad. For example, manufacturing sector is not all that bad. Construction is not all that bad. Infrastructure is not all that bad. So the way I would look at this, it is a challenge, but I would see it is confined. It is very strong in certain pockets and very strong in the developed world and in emerging. For example, in the UK, now to recruit a lorry driver, you need to give him a sign-on bonus. I mean, when we thought about giving a sign-on bonus to a lorry driver. So to summarize for me, there is a challenge. It is like, for example, sometime back, people talked about war for talent, let's say 15 years back. Today, it is great resignation. So it is cyclical. I believe it will stabilize and kind of sanity would be restored. So I'm very optimistic about that, Smriti.
Thanks, Balaji. I know that optimism note is needed by all of us who sort of are having sleepless nights with the talent gaps that we are currently seeing. And you talked about the information technology industry, and building on that, Sonali, do you think there are other domains as well affected? And within the IT industry, if we stay within that industry, are there some specific skills? And does your organization have a domain specific strategy to help with the retention?
Yep. Thanks, Smriti, and thanks, Balaji. I think, it's a very pertinent question. And, I wholeheartedly agree that everything to do with tech is something that, is seeing a huge surge of this. I do, keep Balaji's optimism to say that it is cyclical and hopefully, it will kind of stabilize over the next maybe 18 months is the horizon that I'm looking at. I'll talk specifically with regards to consulting, and it's been a huge challenge in this space, specifically because, when you look at consulting talent, you're looking at the top talent in the country. It's the top 10 to 15% of, your MBAs and your engineering talent. And I think it's more about fungibility of resources. So when I look at my own people, they are fungible across a very broad spectrum of roles. They can go into corporate strategy roles in other organizations. They can go into startups where, we see most of the pull right now. A lot of them with expertise in private equity and financial services can go into PE and VC funds. So I think, we're seeing it play out from a very generalist standpoint, saying that if your talent is something that is, is amenable to different kinds of roles, you will see that much more of a challenge than it being a very specific niche role. So that's really the consulting perspective. And yes, absolutely seeing it to be a big challenge, but also focusing and using this, there's a saying that that a big crisis is too good of an opportunity to waste. So we're actually looking at this as an opportunity to relook at our people value proposition and define it according to individuals rather than have like a very broad spectrum of approach for the whole organization. And I'll be happy to talk about that later during our conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Sonali. And that is a shift because we've always seen that, scale means everything becomes generalized, right? And you have broad processes. So it's interesting that customization is creeping into, HR strategies as well. Thanks for that, Sonali. So, Dipti, how are you preparing conversation with the business leaders? Firstly, are they completely charged with this problem the way the HR folks are? And if they are not, how are you creating both awareness and getting them to respond with a certain urgency?
Yeah, thanks, Smriti, for this question, and thanks Sonali and Balaji for your inputs on this whole phenomena that we are seeing around. Interestingly, the way I look at it, Smriti, is that for organizations which are in growth phase, high growth organization, talent has always been a challenge, right? Now, there may be a little bit of exaggeration given that, we are seeing many more resignations. I kind of agree with Balaji that it's cyclical. There is a pent-up demand in the industry because many organizations put their hiring on hold, many of them put their expansion plans on hold, because of which, there is a pent-up demand in the industry. Also, I think employees waited and watched, through the pandemic to, make their moves, think about what they really want. And, there have been fundamental shifts in how they think and believe about their careers, and we'll talk about it later. And as a result, we are seeing that there is this, we can see that, resignation rates may be going up in some of the sectors. I don't think it is a universal phenomena. I feel that it is a phenomena which is more exaggerated in some places than the other places. And Balaji alluded to that, right? Now, what does it really mean for our managers or our leaders, right? One is that the talent supply and demand there will always be a gap. In some segments, there will be bigger gaps than the others, which means that we know in the last 1.5 years, the whole digital skills piece has really come at the forefront of every organization, right? So organizations which were on the digital journey, it has been accelerated almost by 4 or 5 years, for some companies almost by 10 years, what they wanted to accomplish, right? As a result of it, business models itself have changed. The skills that they require have changed. As a result, the demand for this talent itself has changed. And we must be seeing it in each of our organizations itself. This is parallelly fueled by number of startups that are out there. So I think the funding is available. There is, while the economy has been hit in a certain way, but there is no dearth of investments that are happening in new startups all around us. They're blooming up next door to each of our organizations, right? And I think today employees have a lot of options out there. What it really means for our business managers is that there will always need to prioritize. We may want to do 100 things, but it will be important to choose the most important and the most impactful ones. Despite our best desires, we may not be able to do 100% of everything at the pace at which we want. So I think one thing is that you need to prioritize. Second thing is see your people beyond the workforce that they are. I think the HR folks have been talking about it for many years now, right? But I think this has been now more true than ever before, that that the human behind the workforce is the key to anything that we do, right? We know people have put in discretionary efforts. They have gone all out to make sure that while they manage their own lives, the work has not suffered. Productivity levels are at an all-time high. I think it's really important to pause, see the person for who they are, and basically that relationship between the manager and the employee has to be much deeper, right? And I think, as leaders, we have to take charge of building that bond, the empathy and the understanding with the employee. That is not a maybe, it is a must do today. It has always been, but I think it's at the forefront, right? And I think it is a key to the retention. So as we are saying, from great resignation to great retention, I think, people want to be seen. We've all seen that movie Avatar, where, I see you. I think it is very true for each one of us. I think the third thing is always have the alternate channels open. So I think many organizations, not only across the world, are looking at alternate ways to get the work delivered. So there will be times you will not have the requisite skills, requisite workforce. So build your partnership with other agencies, other organizations to get the work done. But at the same time, I think there has to be more and more focus on prioritization, right? I think what it has also meant for HR is open many more channels for bringing people on board. So it's not only about, the traditional lateral hiring channels, but, the second careers, the campus hiring, we need to leverage everything that's available. The internships, so many people, want to do internships today. So I think opening up a much bigger pipe for bringing talent into the organization. So I think those are some of the conversations and priorities, discussions that each organization and each one of us continues to have with our business. And plan ahead. I think one of the most important things is plan ahead.
No, I think that's very practical advice, and I'm hoping this impacts on diversity for sure, gender diversity, because I think there was a McKinsey report sometime in 2000, maybe 18 or 19, which said with the great shift in the income levels, the gender diversity participation in the labor force had actually dropped, because families started saying, now the spouse doesn't need to work, so why do we need you to go? So the cultural aspect started dominating. So I'm really hoping this work from home helps with that because we all have seen and known the value of that. And this retention thing, there is a question that I want to build up for Shiraj. But before we get to that, you made this point about having deeper relationships with your people. Now, one of my frustrating points, this is just a comment, and maybe if we have time, we can, have other views on this comment. So everybody says people important and all of that stuff, right? And we know the value of frontline supervisors, but try putting them into upskilling. Upskilling that is not technical, upskilling that is behavioral, and the kind of dropout rates you have, because we know that if the supervisor has the right level of empathy and the connect and the right behavioral competencies, the likelihood of creating that bond is going to be more than just purely an organizational brand, right? And yet you look at those numbers and say, hey, what's happening here? So I feel the business leaders, and we need their intervention, because the mails keep going, there is a dropout happening, there's not much attention paid to, but till the reporting manager doesn't get involved, till the business leader doesn't get involved, it doesn't really happen. So that was just me venting out, right? But Shiraj, the question for you, and the point that Dipti made about resignation to the great retention, I'm thinking, do we need a paradigm shift on the word retention itself? Can we promise that to the business? Because that used to always be one of the big metrics of HR teams. And how do we ensure predictable service if there's going to be no? So two questions here. One is, can we assure predictable service if there's not going to be really any retention, even if for the next 18 months, if it's cyclical and it's just 18 months, what do we do with business continuity there? And secondly, should we be rethinking the paradigm of retention?
First of all, thank you, Deepthi, for your comments. I think it sets the stage for me beautifully. Couple of thoughts on this. Firstly, just because there's been a great resignation, there need not be a great retention. So we shouldn't react to something like this and end up doing something knee-jerk. At an organizational level, I think the narrative, to a certain extent, when it comes to retention, needs to shift from engagement to well-being. And there's a reason, and I have at the risk of sounding a little controversial. Engagement is really looking at the individual as a productive resource at the workplace. It is about whatever you're doing at the workplace to bring out the best in the individual as a resource in the workplace. But the fact is that there are several dimensions to the individual. There is more than just the worker in the organization. And there could be several factors that could be impacting effectiveness and productivity at the workplace. That could be beyond the manager, the work desk, workplace events, celebrations, and things like that. And therefore, focus on the whole being, which is well-being, is going to be the most important thing to do or change going forward. Conversations with our employees, our team members have got to become a lot deeper, a lot richer, and a lot more authentic. And therefore, well-being, whether it's financial well-being, professional well-being, social well-being, physical well-being, mental well-being, all this has to be at the core of how we engage with our associates and have our conversations with our associates. One of the things that Great Resignation has taught us is this whole aspect of mental health. It's brought to the fore the whole anxiety and stress in individuals. And believe you me, the anxiety and the stress is not just out of work. It's out of all the dimensions of life that one has to cope with and experience. And therefore, the whole conversation has to go through the stages of awareness, which is, are we willing to are we aware of the fact? Is there enough information around mental health and mental well-being? Appreciation, which is that are we having the right conversations with our people on mental health and mental well-being? And then assimilation, which is, do we have the right systems, processes, and ways of working to make this integral to associate well-being and engagement at the workplace? I mean, there's a very interesting study that Ramglass did, which is we do a workplace well-being study, and the 2021 study showed that out of the 400 companies that we studied, about 61% organizations, they have awareness events for stress, anxiety, depression, recognition, stress management and things like that. But only 35% of the organizations actually offer support in terms of counselors and lifestyle disease management support. So there is awareness, 61%, that there's enough awareness. But I think the next two stages of appreciation and assimilation are going to be extremely important. Now, this is going to be difficult. It's not going to be an easy conversation for managers who are known to have rather transactional work output based conversations. And therefore, we may have to bring in, well-being experts into the mix who can provide that kind of coaching, guidance, and support to managers to be able to have those conversations. And that is something that we have to really kind of, examine and look at. Having said that, there are certain things that we need to kind of just keep doing maybe a little better and smarter than we used to. And one of the things that I keep talking about with my leaders is capability forecasting. Don't just forecast manpower, forecast capability. Look at what are your capability needs for business as usual demands. Look at your capability needs for the growth and expansion demands, and look at your capability needs for the radical disruptive stuff that you want to do, maybe medium to long term. And have that capability segmentation done so that you know what's going to be your buy, build, and rent strategy. And within the build and the rent is the trick of how we keep our associates engaged, or we retain our associates. So the point here is going to be about allowing employees to actually get involved in charting the course of their professional journey in the organizations. Can we actually get them involved in how they would like to kind of look at their roles, look at learning, look at contribution, and make it a nice, virtuous, circle of learning, contribution, and impact in the organization. And that's going to help them, kind of stay and believe in the organization and probably have, a longer term association with the organization. The other piece that we need to be embracing is different formats and forms of engaging with employees. It need not be an appointment letter or a contract anymore. We've got to be a lot more accepting, and we've got to embrace the gig workforce, which could come with some very, very special skills and talent that we may need, but they may be engaging with us in a very different manner. And we've got to be open to accepting that diversity in terms of the way people come to work and the way they would like to give their best and the way they would like to become the most productive and effective version of themselves. So I think those are really the two things. I mean, keep doing the good things that you've already done around retention, maybe a little better and sharper, but obviously shift the narrative in terms of conversations at the workplace from just transactional engagement to more deep-rooted well-being.
No, I think you raised some very great points, Shiraj. And I think we saw that happening in the sports world, right? It became so visible with Osaka saying, I have mental health issues. And pretty much everybody's heart went out to her to have the courage to say that and not address a public conference. And that got the topic up and center. And absolutely, that's an attention all of us need to acknowledge. I think that's the signs of unintended consequences of the pandemic, where we are paying attention to things that we should have paid a long time back and we didn't. And, when you were talking about the conversation you have with leaders to say what are the capabilities we need and the kind of talent we need for current and future, skills, for future outcomes. I'm like thinking, should the metric of retention get replaced by the metric of productivity? If the person is productive, and is retention a metric, is that even going to be a valid metric anymore? I mean, if you have productive people, and I think Dipti also alluded to that, from different channels, what you're calling gig or other employment models, and you have the right competencies, people come and go, but you have a productive workforce and business continuity is happening, then should we even be tracking retention? But that's just wanting to leave a thought with people. And I guess this will need a longer conversation for each one of us at our workplaces. Sonali, I'm going to come back to you. Now, one of the things we see, at least I see in the digital industry, is a huge amount of offer drops, at the time of hiring. So it's not just the great resignation for somebody who's joined you, but it's literally the great resignation even before the person has joined you.
Yeah.
So are you seeing something similar? And, what are your thoughts and how are you managing that?
So, it has definitely become a challenge. Luckily, not a grave challenge yet, but, we've kind of tweaked our engagement model pre-hiring or pre-joining rather to more proactively before it becomes a bigger issue. So I think few things that have worked for us, and just to put it out there as suggestions, we've tried to create like a sponsor in the process who then engages with the individual once we are agreed that we want to roll out an offer to the person. So this sponsor is part of, somebody who was involved in the interview process, possibly one of the interviewers, and who feels an affinity to kind of keep connected with this person. And the durations can vary, right? Sometimes somebody will join in a month, sometimes somebody will join in 3 months. And I guess the longer, the gap is, the higher the chances of someone evaluating another role or deciding to stay back, and various permutations and combinations of those. So I feel like just, kind of keeping various levels of engagement and interaction open before the person joins the organization, and also kind of supporting them in the transition. There is a transition phase from leaving, and that could involve, some second thoughts, kind of thinking, why should I come to this organization versus another one? And I felt just keeping channels of dialogue open and having one person take accountability, saying, yes, I'm going to make sure that this person's going to join is, a change that we've made in our processes. Because, if you don't create accountability, you're kind of leaving it in the open. There are various people involved, recruiting, HR, the line function, and then, no one's really responsible, and someone can drop through the cracks. So I would just say these two things of figuring out a regular cadence of keeping a communication channel and interactive dialogue, supporting through the transition, doubts, questions, just even emotions and feelings, especially when someone's you know actually changing an industry. There could be a lot of apprehension, right, about an entirely new profession. And then lastly, creating accountability with someone to say, yes, I'm going to be on the spot for making sure this person joins. So that's what's really we're trying, and so far it's working well. But love to hear other suggestions of what others are doing, if there's time.
I think this piece about creating accountability of a one points person to say, hey, I'm accountable to see the person joins. I think it sounds a simple thing, but I don't see many organizations do that. It's like a very generic, broad base, somebody will be doing something, but just sort of nailing down a name to it. And like one wit says, to get anything done, you just need to do two things. One is to start it, and the second is to continue it. So it sounds very simple, but yeah, that's what it takes to getting back to basics. Yeah, no, that makes sense, Sonali. Dipti, this question is for you. So on one hand, of course, there's a great resignation, and like I was Sonali was commenting on, even before people join, there's an offer drop, there's a great resignation, and there is now a third whammy, which is the skill gap, right? I think recently ETHR had taken out a report, published a report which said that globally there would be 11.5 million data scientist jobs, right? Now, how do corporates deal with this? There are three very different, impactful, big streams, like gushes of impact on the talent supply.
Yeah. And Smriti, I think I alluded to this earlier to say that, the great resignation is not one single phenomena. It is multiple phenomena put together. And I think the skill gap piece is a very, very important part of it. So I think, given that, the whole digital skills have come into focus, I think the skill gap piece is very, very evident It's not only about how many data scientists you have. It's about what is the skill levels of these data scientists, right? And what is it that the industry needs, right? So I think, and this challenge has been there for some time. So many of us who are from the tech product sector, we've seen the boom for the last few years, since all the startups, started out till today. I think, different organizations have coped in different ways. One of the things that we have seen is that, salaries of some of these sectors have gone through the roof, right? I think, some of the numbers that often we talk about, as HR professionals, we wouldn't have thought about them, when some of this phenomena started. So I think companies have done various things to cope with this. One is obviously, make sure that, they become competitive in the market. I think a very strong focus on campus programs is one of the other things. Build your own timber. I think build your own timber. There are a lot of bright engineers and, MBA students who are out there. You hire them young, you train them, you throw them at big problems, and, make sure that, they grow and basically create the right value proposition for them. So it's not only that you bring in the talent, but also create the right value proposition for them, which makes them stick, which makes them see their career paths, makes them see the long-term, career aspiration being fulfilled in the organization. uh, which has helped, which is something which the organizations have been working towards. But there is no simple answer to it. So honestly, there is no simple answer to it. I think it's been capability building. It has been, as I think Shiraz said it very beautifully, you buy, build, and rent. I think a lot of rent has also been happening across companies to say, and I think consulting firms have been booming as a result of this, because I think they played a very, very important role in, for the stopgap arrangement and plugging, some of the talent gaps that many organizations have had. But I think something which Shiraz really talked about, I think, that is at the forefront. I think no longer the youngsters that we hire are willing to be seen as a headcount, as an individual who comes in and does what their manager says and, live the 9 to 6 life, right? I think they want to be seen as the complete person that they are, right? And there are many dimensions to an individual beyond the work that they do, right? That person is a father, a mother, a child, a parent, all of that, and, a friend, and, people want themselves to be seen for the whole individual. They want to have meaningful relationships at work. They want to be able to, pursue things beyond work, right? And I think you will see more and more of this in some of these younger sectors, where you have younger talent. And I think a lot of new uh, services and, products have come out. I think Round Glass is a great product, from that standpoint. If you see, the kind of services they are offering, there are many, employee assistance portals, as Shiraz said, that, so many companies have, started focusing on well-being, right? So I think while skill gap is real, and I think companies will keep finding, different ways to plug this gap, I think eventually it is about how you are seen by your prospective employees, whether they are gig, whether they are youngsters. Do they see you as a destination, right? That's the first thing. Second thing is that we have to stop thinking of, lifetime careerists in our organization. I think one thing that managers and leaders have to come to peace with is that, we are pit stops in a person's journey, right? It is important that when that person makes that pit stop with us, he has a great experience, he learns, he contributes, he is productive, and basically we get the most out of it. It's a basically synergistic, meaningful relationship that exists. And when that person says goodbye and, moves on, it's a happy parting. We need people to go out as net promoters for us, and we need to create meaningful experiences for people as and when they are with us. I think these are some of the things that people, managers, leaders, organizations have to keep in mind. But the talent supply gap is real, and it is here to stay. I think, and there are no shortcuts to that.
Yeah. And I guess that's how the gig economy will get built, right? This entire rental business, right, of talent. And yeah, no, I think that pit stop was a great point, and which somehow in my mind correlates to my point about is retention a metric that we want to be tracking? So it seems to me, so if we were looking at like 15-year tenures, maybe we still want to track retention, but we say, my gold standard today is 6 years or 7 years. I don't know what that number for different industries would be, but, sort of change that. I think I want to then go back this, since you are also emphasizing on the overall dimensions of a person, not just the work side. So I want to go back to you, Shiraj. And uh, so team bonding used to be a big thing, when we all were in offices, which seems like a decade ago, though just about 18 months back. Now with all of us not being in office, what is it? What are the suggestions on keeping the team culture alive? Because a big part of the stickiness was this team culture. I enjoy being part of a team, but now all of us are insulated from that, right? Barriers, as it were, literally, what I call the weapon of mass destruction are laptops. They are our literal barriers to connecting with the chemistry of people. So, what are your thoughts around that? How do we keep that bonding intact even as people work from home?
So I think there is really no perfect solution to this, and it's been tough. I mean, on people to be able to adjust and adapt uh, to work together from home has not been easy. I think two things. I mean, when we speak to our associates, I think the whole conversation shifted from team bonding to workplace well-being, and there were two parts to it. One part was joy of uh, working in a social setting, being able to kind of work with team members, and the other was the pride of being effective and being able to accomplish what's been given. And every time the associate said that, look, I'm really dying to get back to office, the same associate would say, hey, but don't take away this whole work from home thing completely away, because there are some advantages, there are some elements of convenience that I don't want to part ways with. Being able to avoid a traffic jam and still attend to a meeting early in the morning. Being able to stretch when required, especially in global setups, being able to stretch when required to take that late night call and still not feel exhausted. So the answer lies somewhere in between. And I think there is a lot of talk about the hybrid workplace. I think that's going to be probably, I'm not sure it's going to be the perfect solution right at the outset, but it's going to probably get to a point where we are going to be, from an organizational standpoint, we're going to be able to achieve 100% functional representation on any given day. But associates need not spend more than 40 to 60% of their time in office. And therefore, it's going to be, for the associate, a perfect blend of being able to be in social settings, be with their team members, get that whole aspect of social well-being at the workplace, but also, have that time to themselves in their homes to be effective on things that require just personal attention, personal focus, and keep driving the day-to-day deliverables and tasks. I mean, when it comes to me, one of the questions that I'm asking probably leaders, especially my operations leaders, is that, is there a way by which we can reimagine and therefore redesign, where feasible, redesign the workspace actually to become huddle hubs for innovation, creativity, big ticket project management, getting people together for large social cross-functional meetings that require innovation, creativity, and collaboration to come together. Whereas our homes, or wherever we choose to work from, remain spaces to continue to do our individual work, or work that can be done by accomplishing routine deliverables and tasks. So that whole element of re-looking at the workspace as a center of social well-being, bringing people together and helping them to collaborate in a vibrant environment and get the larger, long-term, big-ticket organizational goals accomplished, while continuing to look at the home as a place where people can still be effective for what concerns them on a day-to-day basis. That's just my thought on this whole aspect of team bonding.
I think that statement, that think about the workplace as a place for social well-being, that's very, very interesting from the way we thought about a workplace 18 months or 2 years back, right? Social well-being was certainly not one of the things which was at the center of our minds. Yeah. No, that's a very interesting input, Shiraj. Thank you. As we come to the conclusion of our panel, Balaji, I actually had a question. A lot of suggestion and ideas have come on what employers can continue to do, and we see that most of them are things we have done. But like Dipti earlier said, is sometimes based on a certain situation and context, you prioritize differently. It's not that these solutions were not known earlier, but now the urgency or the priority changes because the dynamic has changed. So the question to you is, if you had to put very succinctly, what is that employee value proposition that could be like a shield against the great resignation and support the great retention? What would come to your mind?
Smadito, you want maybe a one line or a one word answer. There is no panacea. There is no one size fits all, because it has to be organizational. There has to be a context, right? An organizational context. There is an industry context. I also believe there is a regional context to all of these things, right? Because otherwise, there is no magic bullet is what I believe. I think an organization where generally managers are seen just and fair. I think as HR partners, we need to develop an organizational culture where the managers are generally seen as just and fair, who can create a psychologically safe places for the workforce, right? Again, this can be a little bit broader, but I think there is, because all those things like paying fair wages, being competitive, organization culture, design, career path, succession planning, all of those things. But I believe it's a package, Smriti. I look at this as a complete package. I think some of these things that we talked about, I always believe in giving a realistic job preview at the time of recruitment so that we can avoid post-purchase dissonance. I believe recruitments are like purchasing decisions. So you minimize the post-purchasing dissonance, you can effectively avoid people leaving within the first 90 days or first 180 days. So I think for me, I will not look at this as a one subject, but it's a complete package. That's the only way we can do it, because a multi-prong, it can't be single specific responses with it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. It's just my left brain which says, give me that one line answer that, the audience listening to saying, hey, I'm going to pursue this with wholehearted commitment. Yeah, but you're right. In real life, it's much, much broader than that.
Can I add one
Please,
comment?
Sonali, please.
I do think all our organizations' value props will be individual driven versus being a one size fits all approach, and they will be constantly evolving, as Shiraj referred to support people during their moments of truth, and that is what will keep people seen and tied to the organization. So I just wanted to leave that thought with the group.
No, and that's going to be challenging. Imagine you have a workforce with some IT organizations have of 200,000 plus, and tailoring it to individual needs. That'll be really a hard reset on the way this has been thought about all along. Yeah, no, that's great, Sonali. And I think intuitively, all of us see the value of that, right? Because if we were at the receiving end of something tailored completely to our needs, we know how well we would respond to that, right? So it would be the same for every single employee in an organization. Oh, I think that's great. Thanks for adding that, Sonali. Thank you. We are coming to the end of our panel discussion and the time allotted to us. We have about 4 minutes left. If you can pace yourself in those 4 minutes, and if you want to add any closing comments, please go ahead.
Well, I think all I would like to say is that, I know there has been the points being made, but focusing on the whole being, looking at the individual as a full individual, understanding that, they're not just work stages, but there are life stages that an individual has to go through. Bring to the fore conversations that have hitherto, not happened. It could be because of just the reality at work, or just the capability of the manager. And I think bring in external help where required to manage the change in the quality of conversations between managers and their teams, which is that whole element of being aware about well-being issues, appreciating the well-being issues, and then assimilating through systems, processes that make it integral to the work culture of the organization. That's all I would say.
And I just want to close on that because when I've heard you and all the other panelists, talk about that, I'm thinking what it would do to the fabric of the society. Imagine if you've had the experience of being treated like a full person at work. What is it that you carry back to your homes, right? And what is it that you influence in your relationship with others? Because many times I felt that the corporates are actually the hubs of social change as well, right? And because we have the wherewithal and the resources, and we start something, for every employee there are 4 people who could potentially get influenced. So I think it is an absolutely, if I use a bit of a dramatic word, besides a organizational goal, I think it's a very noble goal which really sorts out many of the conflicts that we see in society. So um, I think on that note, I really want to thank all of you for a marvelous discussion, such well thought through points that each one of you made. And I do hope that the audience that has logged in has benefited from this. You're welcome to reach out to people at ETHR World for any clarifications that you further need. And I guess they'll send their questions in to us. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the day. It was wonderful, wonderful catching up with all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Smriti, for facilitating this beautiful. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being a part of this.
Thank you, everyone, for imparting some great knowledge on how the organizations can become more proactive, improve retention, and also attract a workforce who have their choice of roles. What are the opportunities that Great Resignation has brought and how they can be harnessed for the greater good, etc. Truly an informative session. Let's move ahead and dig more.